Hello everyone. In this class, we'll learn about hemolytic anemias. The objectives of this class are to learn about the types of hemoglobin, the hemoglobin catabolism in normal individuals, that is, how RBCs are destroyed, the old RBCs in you and me. Then we have to learn about the mechanisms of hemolysis. There are two mechanisms basically. Then most importantly for your exams, we need to learn about the classification of hemolytic anemias 1, and we need to list out the common features of hemolytic anemias including laboratory features. Coming to the introduction, we all know that hemoglobin is made of heme and globin chains. Iron plus protoporphyrin is the one that gives rise to heme, and this then combines with 4 chains, that is globin chains, to give rise to hemoglobin. So there are 4 types of globin chains. Those are alpha, beta, gamma and delta. This is in adults. Heme along with 4 globin chains will give rise to hemoglobin, and all normal hemoglobins in adults will have 2 alpha chains. A very important point to remember. Based on the age of an individual, hemoglobins can be of 3 main types. First is embryonal hemoglobins, which is seen in the embryonic stage. Second is the fetal hemoglobin, seen in the fetal stage of life. And after birth, what we see is adult hemoglobin. This is seen about 6 months after birth. Embryonal hemoglobins are seen at 6 to 11 weeks of gestational age, that is the pregnancy, while fetal hemoglobins are seen at 10 to 38 weeks of gestational age, and adult hemoglobins are seen after 38 weeks of gestational age. However, the adult hemoglobins, the proportion will become proper only after about 6 months of age. If we look at the globin chains which make up the hemoglobin, in embryonal stage of life, initially the embryo will have 2 zeta chains and 2 epsilon chains. Later on, the epsilon ones will change to gamma, at which stage it is called Portland 1 hemoglobin. Then it becomes alpha 2 and epsilon 2 types of globin chains, which is called Gower 2 hemoglobin. When it comes to the fetal stage, there will be what is known as fetal hemoglobin or HbF, which will have 2 alpha and 2 gamma chains. And in adult stage, the main one is HbA, which is comprised of 2 alpha and 2 beta globin chains. HbA2 and HbF are in very less quantities in adults. HbA2 made of 2 alpha and 2 delta chains, and HbF made of 2 alpha and 2 gamma chains. So in the transition, we note that from zeta globin chains, it has changed over to alpha globin chains, which is there starting from the late stage of embryonal period and persists till the adult period. Why I am stressing upon this point is that if at all there is a disease which affects alpha globin chains, the presentation will start from the embryonal period, because embryonal period in the later stages itself there is alpha chains. However, if there is a disease which affects beta globin chains, then the presentation will start only in the adult period of life. This is important in thalassemia, wherein we have 2 types. One is alpha thalassemia, wherein there is a deficiency of alpha globin chains, and the second is beta thalassemia, wherein there is a deficiency of beta globin chains. So naturally, if you look at this table, alpha thalassemia will start presenting at an early stage of life, while beta thalassemia will present only in the adult stage, that is 3 to 6 months. I'll explain to you why that 3 to 6 months period is the time of presentation. In this graph, we can see that the topmost red curve, which is the alpha chain quantity, it keeps on increasing and it peaks at 6 weeks of gestational age, and thereafter it is constantly high. Whereas epsilon and zeta chains will fall, and after a few days of 6 weeks they'll completely disappear off. Next is the yellow curve that you have to see, that is the gamma globin chain. It keeps elevating, but soon after birth the levels will undergo a fall, and by 20 to 24 weeks the levels are too low. The converse is true with the beta globin chain, the levels of which start increasing right after birth, and by the time this fetal hemoglobin undergoes a fall, that is gamma chain undergoes a fall, the beta globin chains would have attained a peak, which means that the adult hemoglobin, that is HbA, which comprises of 2 alpha and 2 beta chains, the levels of that will attain a peak at about 6 months or 24 weeks of life, and the fetal hemoglobin, that is HbF, will undergo a fall and will almost disappear by 24 weeks, that is 6 months of life. Moving on, let us now discuss the types of adult hemoglobins. There are 3 types: hemoglobin A, hemoglobin A2 and hemoglobin F. Out of these 3, hemoglobin A is the most abundant hemoglobin in the adult life and comprises of 96 to 98% of all hemoglobins. The globin chains in hemoglobin A are 2 alpha and 2 beta. Next is hemoglobin A2, which comprises of about 1.5 to 3.2% of all the hemoglobins in adult life, and it has 2 alpha and 2 delta chains. The least abundant type of hemoglobin in adult life is the fetal hemoglobin or hemoglobin F, which comprises of 0.5 to 0.8%, and it has 2 alpha and 2 gamma chains. In this graphical representation, the red dots that you see are heme, and rest of the circle that you are seeing, those are the 4 globin chains. So the first one to your left has 2 alpha and 2 beta chains, so obviously that is hemoglobin A. The middle one has 2 alpha and 2 delta chains, globin chains, so obviously that is hemoglobin A2, and the last one has 2 alpha and 2 gamma chains, and hence that is hemoglobin F or fetal hemoglobin. There is a test called hemoglobin electrophoresis. Now this hemoglobin electrophoresis can categorize various hemoglobins based on their globin chains. This is especially useful if you are suspecting any of the hemoglobinopathies which have altered globin chains. So it is very useful in thalassemias. Let us understand how RBC degradation occurs in normal individuals, that is you and me. 80 to 90% of the RBC destruction or hemolysis occurs extravascularly in sites like spleen, liver and bone marrow. Once the RBCs are degraded, heme is liberated, the globin chain is absorbed into the amino acid pool. The heme is then transformed into unconjugated bilirubin in the cytoplasm of the macrophages. This unconjugated bilirubin then moves out of the cytoplasm of macrophages into the bloodstream, where it combines with albumin to form a complex. This complex then moves on to the liver, wherein it is conjugated by the enzyme UDP glucuronyl transferase to give rise to what is called conjugated bilirubin. This conjugated bilirubin is excreted in bile, and in gut what happens is some of it is excreted in feces, some of it is excreted in the urine, and some of it will undergo recirculation back into the liver. This is called enterohepatic circulation. The metabolism of heme to give rise to stercobilinogen is the reason why there is a yellow color to the feces, and the metabolism into urobilinogen is the reason why urine has a yellow color. Coming to the topic for today's class, which is hemolytic anemias. These are the anemias which result from increase in RBC destruction. The normal lifespan of RBCs is 120 days, and in hemolytic anemias it is much lesser due to destruction of RBCs. And the various manifestations of hemolytic anemias depend on how the factory, that is the bone marrow, is compensating for the anemia. Let us have a look into the classification of hemolytic anemias. This is a very important topic as far as your exams are concerned. Hemolytic anemias can either be intrinsic or extrinsic. So intrinsic hemolytic anemias are those in which the defect is in the RBC itself, and extrinsic hemolytic anemias are those in whom the defect is not in the RBCs, it is some external factor. The intrinsic hemolytic anemias are classified into hereditary and acquired. Under hereditary, it could either be because of RBC membrane defect, the examples for which are hereditary spherocytosis and hereditary elliptocytosis. It could be due to hemoglobin defect, examples for which are thalassemia and sickle cell anemia. Or it could be due to an enzyme defect within the RBC, that is, an example for which is glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme deficiency. Under the acquired causes, one important disease is there called paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, or PNH. Coming to the extrinsic hemolytic anemias, there are three important types here. The first one is antibody-mediated lysis, examples for which are autoimmune hemolytic anemias and transfusion reactions. Then there is mechanical trauma, examples for which are microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, thrombocytopenic purpura, or replaced cardiac valves. Lastly, some miscellaneous causes are there, for example, infections, chemicals, increased size of spleen leading to destruction of RBCs, etc. Let us discuss the general features which are useful in the diagnosis of hemolytic anemias. There are three components to this. The first is feature of increased RBC destruction. The second component include the features of compensatory increase in production. And the third are the features of destroyed cells, that is morphological features. The first component, which was features of increased destruction, there are two sites or two mechanisms of hemolysis. The first is extravascular hemolysis, which is seen in normal individuals, and the second is intravascular hemolysis, rarely seen in normal individuals. Intravascular hemolysis occurs, like what is in the name, within the blood vessels. Once RBCs are lysed within the blood vessels, hemoglobin becomes free, and to that hemoglobin, one more protein called haptoglobin comes and attaches to make it less toxic. Then it gets converted to unconjugated bilirubin and follows the same pathway. However, if RBC lysis, hemolysis is so much that haptoglobin gets over, then this free hemoglobin will go to kidney, and in kidney there will be hemoglobinuria. And in intravascular hemolysis, most of the times it so happens that the haptoglobin will be finished off. So free hemoglobin will be there. This table shows the differences between intra and extravascular hemolysis. In extravascular hemolysis, the site is macrophages of spleen, bone marrow as well as liver, whereas intravascular hemolysis occurs within the blood vessels. Some examples for extravascular hemolysis are thalassemia and sickle cell anemia, whereas for intravascular hemolysis, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria is the classical example. Serum haptoglobin is normal in extravascular hemolysis while it is reduced in intravascular hemolysis. Hemoglobinemia, hemoglobinuria and hemosideruria, all these three are not seen in extravascular hemolysis but seen in intravascular hemolysis. Unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, that is elevation in unconjugated serum bilirubin, is more characteristic of extravascular hemolysis because in intravascular it is not that elevated. Lastly, splenomegaly is common in extravascular hemolysis as compared to intravascular hemolysis. The reason is that spleen is the site where hemolysis takes place in extravascular hemolysis, whereas in intra it is within blood vessels. So that is why no reason for spleen to get enlarged. Using the basics we saw in the previous slides, let us now list out the features of increased destruction of RBCs. First one is unconjugated bilirubin in blood is increased. It is moderately increased in cases of extravascular hemolysis, while it is mildly increased in cases of intravascular hemolysis. This gives rise to jaundice or yellowish discoloration of sclera and skin. Next is stool stercobilinogen is increased, giving dark colored stools. Urine urobilinogen is increased, giving high colored urine. And bone marrow iron stores are increased as RBCs are being destroyed at a rapid pace. Since there is anemia in the blood, the bone marrow will try to compensate for it. Firstly, you'll be able to see increased number of RBC precursors in the bone marrow so that the bone marrow can produce more RBCs. Then some of the precursors of RBCs like reticulocytes and nucleated RBCs, they will leak out into the peripheral blood. At one point of time, what happens is bone marrow is unable to compensate for the anemia in the peripheral blood. That is the time when organs such as liver and spleen, which once used to produce some of the components of the blood, they will take over the job from the bone marrow. So that is what is called extramedullary hematopoiesis. Medulla means marrow, that is in this case it is bone marrow. Something that is happening outside the bone marrow is called extramedullary. So extramedullary hematopoiesis means production of blood cells that is happening outside the bone marrow. The third component was morphological features of destroyed RBCs. So what are those features? First is microspherocytes. These are RBCs which are small, and instead of the biconcave shape, they will have a spherical shape. And since they have a spherical shape, they will not have a central pallor. Second is elliptocytes. And finally we have red cell fragments, that is pieces of RBCs, also known as schistocytes. SCHISTOCYTES. How will we diagnose hemolytic anemias? We'll use both clinical features as well as laboratory diagnosis. Let us have a look at the clinical features first and then move on to the laboratory diagnosis. First, there will be clinical features of anemia, various general features of anemia that you already saw in previous classes. Then there will be jaundice because bilirubin is more, that is why there is discoloration of sclera and skin. The next feature is the development of pigment stones, which are black colored stones in the gallbladder. So these are gallstones. Then we can assess skeletal deformities, which is seen in various inherited hemolytic anemias, leg ulcers, enlargement of spleen, and stool or urine discoloration. In laboratory diagnosis, initially when we do a complete blood count, we will find that hemoglobin is very low. Then if we do a reticulocyte count using supravital stains such as brilliant cressyl blue, we'll find that the number of reticulocytes is disproportionately high in comparison to the anemia. Examination of a peripheral blood film will show morphological changes in RBCs, such as the presence of schistocytes or fragmented RBCs, the presence of spherocytes, the presence of reticulocytes, and nucleated RBCs. WBCs at times will show shift to left, that is, presence of immature WBCs. There may be an increase in platelet count. If the bone marrow examination of a patient having hemolytic anemia is done, then the number of RBC precursors would be increased, which is what is called erythroid hyperplasia. So hyperplasia is nothing but increase in the number of cells, and since RBC precursors are the ones that are hyperplastic, it is called erythroid hyperplasia. Next, myeloid is to erythroid ratio will obviously be decreased because in the denominator there is erythroid and the number of erythroid precursors are increased. We can do some biochemical investigations, and if we do them, we'll find that unconjugated bilirubin is elevated, stool stercobilinogen and urine urobilinogen is increased, bone marrow iron stores, you'll find it increased. Lastly, serum haptoglobin, if the mechanism is intravascular hemolysis, it will be reduced. Some other investigations that can be done are examination of urine to look for hemoglobin, X-ray, that is hair on end appearance, features of extramedullary hematopoiesis like ultrasound can be done to assess the size of spleen and liver. Apart from these, you can do hemoglobin electrophoresis to identify diseases such as thalassemia as well as sickle cell anemia. This list here gives you some of the important hemolytic anemias. As far as your exams are concerned, thalassemia, sickle cell anemia and autoimmune hemolytic anemias are the most important. To briefly summarize this class, we initially learnt about different types of hemoglobins which were seen in embryonic period, fetal period as well as adult period. Then we saw the globin chains involved in all these three. Especially we saw in adults that all hemoglobins had 2 alpha chains normally. Then we discussed about hemoglobin catabolism in normal individuals, that is extravascular hemolysis which occurs in spleen, liver and bone marrow macrophages, how it was excreted and all that. We then briefly defined hemolytic anemias. We classified them into intrinsic and extrinsic. We saw 3 general features which were useful in the diagnosis of hemolytic anemias, namely features of increased RBC destruction, features of compensatory increase in production, as well as morphological features of destroyed RBCs. Briefly, I explained to you what intravascular hemolysis is like. We saw the differences between intra and extravascular hemolysis. Then we tried to diagnose hemolytic anemias using some clinical features and some laboratory features. That was it in this class. In the next class,